my youth in teaching, so it worked well for me as a graduate student, focused on this wonderful nation. So again, that's what brings me here. So again, my apologies if there's any inconvenience at the time of this presentation. I wanted to make sure that we had this captured digitally, knowing again our economy and where we are in the 21st century. So again, I really do appreciate you giving me your time to be here with us, sharing space with me. One as a foreigner, two as somebody again who's not necessarily, it's not like I did this study with the faculty member or student here at the University of Pretoria, so I'm extremely grateful, honored and privileged to be here. So I just wanted to get that out the way. So once again, I don't have the disadvantage I have is I'm not aware of time. I don't have to go on my phone. So I have to. I'm gonna try to just play it by ear and use what we would say is the whole system. You know, we're not born with these machines, so I should be able to figure it out. I'm gonna try not to move this case when I go too much. I think that's what's making it tune in and out. Apologies for that. So again, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Daquan Lawrence. I'm originally from Harlem, New York, Harlem, New York. I am currently a doctoral candidate at Howard University, which is located in Washington, D.C. And I am many things, but first and foremost, I consider myself a student of life and a father. I would say it's probably the second most important after that. I have a young daughter, Destiny, who's about to turn 7. But what brings me here, I would say a little bit about me. Originally grew up in New York, but my mom was an orphan. So I'm going to try to run through my life story really quickly before I jump in. My mom was an orphan, and her name is Makeba. I say Makeba, some people may say Makeba, but she was named after Mariam Makeba, who is obviously a world-renowned freedom fighter and musician and phenomenal woman who loved her country. So for my mother to be named after Mariam Makeba, for her to also be an orphan, for her to grow up in social services, on welfare, for me to be a product of a teenage parent household in circumstances where, statistically speaking, we hear so many negative stereotypes about teenage parents. My father also was involved in what we consider, a life of crime, right? So I'm not necessarily somebody speaking to you from a point of American privilege. I'm not somebody who comes from a trust fund. I have no corporate ties. I have nobody that paid for my education. I literally am a beneficiary of the welfare state, and me being somebody who utilized the welfare state to get to this point, I'm now here speaking to you as someone who rose from my own ashes or trenches, if you will. So I say that just to put that into perspective, because relatively speaking, I know where I'm at. I know the history somewhat of this country. So again, I don't think that my experience in urban poverty gives me any more reason or advantage on anybody. I just think that that's just my experience. That's what brings me here. So again, my mother was named after, like I said, a South African woman, and for that's the reason and excuse I would like to use for my interest in this. I also have what is considered a revolutionary school of thought. Well, I come from a revolutionary school of thought, and I like to say, politically speaking, the left is the middle to me. So whatever you think about American politics, before you ask and when you ask, just know that the lens that I'm going to give you is going to be the most radical lens that you can think of, because I'm a product of urban poverty in America, right? So again, I'm not coming from a position of status. That being said, the name of this presentation, my dissertation, is Urban Class Lecture in Post-Apartheid South Africa, Case Studies from Johannesburg and Setswana. I am a student at Howard University in the African Studies Department, which is Howard University was the first university in America to have an all-black university staff lead the field of African studies that was founded in the 50s. So it's very, very important for me to be here, and it's very, I take it very seriously again as a student of the diaspora and as a student of life. I would also like to thank the Center for African Studies, where my dissertation advisor works, where I serve as a student member and graduate student researcher. She was so kind to allow me to live stream this event so I could be able to showcase what I've been working on for the last 6 years. So thank you, Dr. Johnson. So quickly, I have a lot of information. Again, as we were all privy to the history of South Africa, to me, I don't like omitting things, because I think when you omit things, that it leaves out or it changes the context. So I try to give a thorough estimation as, again, as a foreigner, as an outsider, historical events in South Africa that has led to what I would consider the status quo from, again, a foreigner standpoint, despite whatever commonalities I have with members of the African diaspora. So I'm going to go through the background statement of the problem, my methods, brief history, and then numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7 are going to hopefully go a little bit quicker, and that's why we'll get to the meat of my findings. So the background, the project investigates class structure and modern post-apartheid, specifically looking at members of the urban Black populations located in the Gauteng province or municipalities of Johannesburg and Pretoria. The core research questions, you can frame them two ways. The first question is, how does race continue to shape class and urban class constructions in South Africa? The second is, how is the middle class defined in urban South Africa? Notice that I've specifically South Africa is a large country, many differences between the areas, even amongst the populations and amongst the rural populations. Many variations, many differences. So I had to be extremely specific and be attempting to be extremely specific. The areas that need the most were Soweto and Johannesburg, Sunnyside here in Pretoria. So for the last 6 years, I've been spending a considerable amount of time in Sunnyside. Again, with my partner Ali Mohammed, who was helping me create a community-based research model of a ground-up study that is necessarily pulling on members of. Although I have met with government officials, I have met with political parties, I have met with students, I have met with professors, I'm not leaning on their experience. The primary experience here are members of what we could say the labor class. Some people call them the working poor. I think these are misnomers, and these are things that I'm going to get into during this analysis of class. But again, me coming from humble beginnings, I believe I relate. And one thing is I'm kind of giving away some of my findings here, but I believe class is permeable. So even though they may say this is where the non-whites are supposed to go, this is where the whites are supposed to go, this is where the rich are supposed to go, this is where the poor are supposed to go, in reality, everybody's interdependent. In reality, if you want to use the Marxist treatment, the proletariat and bourgeoisie are inexplicably intertwined because, again, capital obviously depends on labor. What happens when capital does not have labor? Some say now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, we have machines, so we don't need people. The machines can do what people do. We'll see how far we get with that. Getting back to the background, so I use class analysis tools by African diaspora scholars. With scholars, W.E.B. Du Bois, an American, Bantu Steve Biko, a South African, Amilcar Cabral, a Guinean, Frantz Fanon, as well as Kwame Nkrumah and Walter Rodney. Again, so we have a wealth of perspectives from the African diaspora. To me, that is extremely important because I'm going to fuse and use their theories and notions of critiques of capitalism, classism, as I coalesce it with not only my findings, but the Marxist perspective. A lot of people, I think, limit themselves to Marxism, even here, again, I know where I'm at in South Africa, where we think that we're criticizing capitalism just because we're using Marxist treatments. In my estimation, Marx wasn't talking about Africa. Marx was talking about Western Europe. That's a conversation for another day. But with that being the impetus, I would like to use African diaspora or ground-up critiques of the political economy. Instead of using Marx or leaning on Marx or only, again, to me, it's lazy to just say, again, like, because of this, communism is this, socialism is this. It's more nuanced than that, especially because these things actually predated Europe. So it depends which text we're going to refer to. It depends which sources we're going to use, and that, and so on and so on. So again, as you can see, like I said, I have a very grounded and radical school of thought. The class conceptions of Western society are revised to allow application to 21st century urban South African conditions. And the study examines class and the social dimensions of inequality because, again, specifically me speaking as an outsider, as an American, we can say that during the Apartheid administration, when you created the homelands, we now have what became between 8 and 10 nationalities, whatever have you. But from, again, an American standpoint, some people would say, oh, well, what's the difference between different members of groups in South African society? I don't necessarily think that, again, there is much in common as people would say that we have. It's not to say that everybody's different and we should be individualized, we should fragment. However, the things that are the same are a baseline. and the things that are distinct, again, are unique. So I don't think that, again, grouping everybody in the same class is productive as it can be. What I'm particularly studying here, or what I'm using to conceive of a new class analysis or new dimensions of class, will be one, occupation, English language proficiency, which again is particularly important here, even though we're in some would say in a developing country in the global south. Consistent access to the internet, a bank account, a scribe status, otherwise known as how the market views your employability, perceptions of blackness, which again is important in a society that is not only multiracial, but uses Western paradigms where we appropriate opportunities and services based on, again, what notions of Africanity you subscribe to. Some people are proud to be black, some people are not proud to be black. Some people believe that their power is measured by their proximity to whiteness. I don't. So again, because I don't, I could actually go into different rooms, and again, I could put that on the table so we could all dissect it and chop it up. And last but not least, we have education level, which is further delineated between formal education and informal education. Again, remember, I'm speaking to you as a product of a parent, or many of us come from households where our grandparents didn't go to college. Our grandparents may have been farmers. Our grandparents may have been working in other places and doing other things for work. But they instill the importance and the values of education to us. I believe that's important to respect different institutions. Again, being in South Africa, I believe Umakulu, if you think about the institution of women, grandmothers, these are institutions, they're institutions in and of themselves. So again, when I talk about education, I believe you can be formally educated. It's great, you got a piece of paper. Some says it's manumission papers, you're now free, good job. You could also be informally educated. You also deserve respect, because what you have to do between 9 and 5 or the 24 hours that you exist in one day is equal to what somebody's doing that goes to work for Coca-Cola or De Beers or the government. Just because you have more money in a bigger house and a bigger car doesn't make you more worthy. When you die, we all die. If you ride first class, when the plane goes down, I believe the first class passengers also go down with the plane. But maybe I'm mixing things up. Statement of the problem. So South Africa, I'm going to not read this word for word. South Africa has been widely discussed for its massive inequality. Earlier studies have explained that economic elements and divisions of inequality, while few researchers have called for awareness of the social dimensions of inequality in South Africa and the role class occupies in the new South Africa. What is less widely known is why some Africans in urban populations have varying lifespans, have varying lifestyles, have various recreational habits or preferences within their lifestyles. Recently, new patterns of stratification have emerged, creating the need for new assessments of implications of both race and class, which were highly correlated during the apartheid era. In post-apartheid South Africa, an assessment of class can produce findings about the distributions of various levels of poverty. Otherwise, what I would like to say is underdevelopment. I think poverty is another concept. Defined as economic underdevelopment for members of urban populations as well as other social factors. In a society plagued by economic inequality, rooted in policies of racial division, land distribution and redistribution, as well as social amalgamations and divergences among a heterogeneous population or citizenry, class analyses that account for such factors are very important. While factors that constitute class are usually related to economics, class analyses are arbitrary, and they can consider various methods. They can consider social, political, cultural, or economic status. It does not just have to be an economic treatment when someone says class. That said, skills such as language ability, the ability to manipulate technology, function via the internet, access a bank account are all equally important, as well as education level, occupation, or employment status. This is integral in modern South Africa for a minimum of 2 reasons. One, in our capitalist global economy, class divisions are not as structured as we think. It's not literally like there's a wall, right, or an invisible barrier, just like borders. We like to say that's this country is this country, this country, this country. This is Zambia, this is Zimbabwe, this is South Africa, this is Zimbabwe. But some places, as we know, a border may be a street. If you're on that side of the street, you're in one country. If you're on this side of the street, you're in another country, right? So we would like to say that there's a class distinction because there's a political line that's been drawn, right? Conceived by some people, maybe by the Berlin Conference, I don't know, or it's a derivation of that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't talk to my brother just because he goes to a private school and I don't happen to be formally educated. That my brother is still my brother, whether it's a blood brother or whether it's a distant relative. If we conceive or if we subscribe to these notions of inferiority and superiority, then we'll stop and we'll say, no, I'm not going to speak to you because you're from a different race. No, I'm not going to speak to you because you're from a different class. No, I'm not going to speak to you because of your sexuality. No, I'm not going to speak to you because of how much money you make. What's the difference? I don't know. You tell me. So, again, reason number 2, class categorization such as low income, middle income, high income, working poor, working class or middle class or high income, I think that they're lazy. I think that they're misnomers because, again, people have way more differences than how much money they make. Sure, everybody makes over 300,000 rand in that group. It doesn't mean that they have the same day-to-day experiences. Maybe very affluent, but they still have different experiences. Are we accounting for that? So that's what this study tries to get to the root of. And again, this is my brother Ali. We're here in the corner of Steve Biko, Robert Biko Street. Very important people. It's not lost on me. Again, as a student of the diaspora, the things that Steve Biko went through and Robert Biko goes through, or went through, right? So again, I say that I guess I'm giving away my position. I'm supposed to be objective, but I'm not. I still identify with the marginalized classes. How could I not? I guess the PhD is supposed to make me forget that. I guess I'm supposed to forget where I came from. That's a Kanye West line. I know we don't like Kanye, but I'm sorry. Moving ahead. So get into the methods and the theoretical framework. So here we go. We have two cities. Again, pardon me for my naivete as a junior researcher and aspiring social scientist that is from New York. Pretoria and Johannesburg. To me as a New Yorker, there's so many commonalities between Joburg and New York outside of the Dutch influence. I'm not trying to say that Joburg is New York. I'm just saying, relatively speaking, what New York is to America, Joburg could possibly be to South Africa. I could be wrong. I have no problem with that. Pretoria, the city with the second most embassies in the world. The city with the number 1 most embassies in the world, Washington, D.C., where I'm a student. So that was a given for me. Pretoria and Joburg, I love driving up and down. I love all of the populations between these cities. And I wish I could have interviewed and spoken to everyone that lives here. But unfortunately, I couldn't. But maybe in the future I can. To assess the post-apartheid class structure in urban black populations in Joburg and Pretoria, the study utilized a combination of community-based research methods to review archival information and gather data from participants. This study spans from December 2020, which is my first semester as a graduate researcher and graduate student at Howard University, through April 2026, which is now present day. Between January 21 and April 26, the study included a total of 6 site visits with research sites where data was collected via participant observation and interviews, specifically in Soweto and Sunnyside. Data from observation and interviews was coalesced with themes from archival research findings, as well as policy findings, social media analysis, and geographic information systems and aerial photography to account for the spatial elements of apartheid or under development. The themes and findings of the data were then situated and assessed using class analysis tools provided by African diaspora scholars, as mentioned. The primary framework for the study is an adaptation of W.E.B. Du Bois' Philadelphia Negro study, which took place in the late 19th century. I believe it was published in 1899, where Du Bois, one of the first Harvard-educated African Americans, he was able to say that the color line was the greatest problem of the 20th century. What I'm trying to do with this study is say that the color line remains the biggest problem of the 21st century, despite the fact that we have so many privileged, affluent members of the African diaspora, members that again are of minority populations that may have what we could consider buku status or be bourgeoisie, right? But the middle class, what does it look like? How big is it? Or is the middle class more so a buffer to keep everybody in check and keep things in play because people think that we're behaving like celebrities and the rich people that we idolize, but we're not, because we still too struggle. We still too have that big, what's the D word? Oh, debt. Yeah, we all have debt. So, in order to see where the color line rests in this society, understanding that the global political economy is fundamentally capitalist, classist, and upholds racialism, the study uses pro-Africanist class perspectives, which is useful in interpreting the data. These theories and these notions were utilized when interpreting what the findings were. Bantu Steve Biko's concept of black consciousness, Amilcar Cabral's notion of class suicide, which if I would just like to briefly say, class suicide is identifying, we like to say cultural sensitivity, we like to say that we obviously should, understand the differences in humanities and respect differences in humanity, but respect everybody as a human, no matter which population you belong to. So class suicide is the idea that you can commit social suicide by giving up your social status by trying to help another, whether it's because you need a heart transplant, whether it's because you need $1, whether it's because you know that you want your daughter to be educated at the University of Pretoria, so you need to befriend a professor or a current student because maybe you want your daughter to be a student here one day. Whatever it looks like, somebody has to jump out the window to say, hey, I'm not going to follow the unbroken rule of I can't speak to people or identify with people who are not in my class. Franz Fanon's theories of the importance of culture and the duality of racialism and its impact on indigenous and native populations, Kwame Nkrumah's notion of panpsychism, and the latent or intended effects of Christianity, Islam, other religions, as what they have on the African population, and Dr. Walter Rodney's concepts about the function of the global political economy and the fundamental role of the state are all used to assess, again, the findings and the things or the notions and ideas that I investigated. A total of 75 printed copy questionnaires and 10 electric questionnaires were distributed in Soweto and Sunnyside between April and October 25 of last year. 5 locations were used to disseminate the questionnaires. Those locations were universities, shopping centers and restaurants, residential areas, transportation checkpoints and landmarks, as well as tourist attractions. I spent up to 4 hours at each location during each site visit, again, with my brother Ali, soliciting people, instead of, again, using a top-down model, there were times where we used incentives, but again, I didn't want people to speak to me because we were trying to give them things. I didn't want people to speak to me because they were trying to influence a Western or pro-Western agenda because I'm an American and I thought that people would want me to know things so I could give positive feedback. I didn't want to be biased in any fashion. So again, I wanted this to be from what we would consider common people. The people, again, as I've been told, there's a lot of people in South Africa who don't go to Sunnyside. That's interesting. It's like that in New York too. Some people in New York don't go to other places in New York. Some people in DC don't go to other places in DC. It's like that. But that's what attracts me. It's not because, again, anybody's a character or caricature of me or to me. It's not because, again, anybody's a war baby or anybody's, again, what we would say in New York, a hood booger. I don't see that because, again, if we're talking about people who are from the underclass, I'm from the underclass. So what am I scared of? Am I now my clothes because I wear suits? Now I have to only walk with the suits? That's what they tell us. I don't know, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. So via random selection, 85 of the 85 distributed questionnaires, data from 7 anonymous participants or responses, or approximately 12.14% of the study's sample population was highlighted in the study's findings, while the remaining data was used to inform the background writing for various sections of my dissertation. I conducted at least 30 off-the-record formal and informal interviews with various stakeholders such as politicians, community organizers, artisans and cultural artists, businessmen and women, nonprofit leaders, youth leaders, students, elders, migrant workers, sex workers, professors, and government employees. So again, I tried to again get a rich perspective of what South Africans think about the current or contemporary society in the post-apartheid era. As mentioned, the dependent variable in this study is class, while the independent variables were occupation, English language proficiency, consistent access to the internet, access to a long-term bank account, ascribed status or how the market views your employability, perceptions of blackness, informal and formal education level. To qualify the variables above, using the qualitative and quantitative methods mentioned, we use surveys, interviews, scales, GIS and aerial photography, as well as archival information to measure respondents' impressions of the social dynamics of South African society, again, specifically in these urban locations. So, this is, again, I would say, the most informative part for me. And it's, I would say, as a passionate person, it's kind of a little bit hard for me to like explain to my contemporaries or to my network how important South Africa is, not because of Amapiano, not because of celebrity, not because of, again, whatever fashion trend is going on, and not because of whatever thing that people want to reduce South Africa to. To me, the history, everything is current events. So as a social studies teacher who works with youth, who's learning from youth and exchanging with youth every day. What I always talk to them about is South Africa and the plight of South Africans, again, no matter where you fall on the quote-unquote class spectrum. Current, future, and past. Freedom fighters, again, members of different backgrounds, despite your ethnicity. Again, I believe all people are important, so I have the ultimate amount of reverence for South Africa. And again, me as a student of life and as a student of African studies, I try to get this right in my framing of what would be the historical issues. So again, please forgive me for my naivete, and please inform me and educate me with anything that I did wrong. And as I did this presentation yesterday in Johannesburg, I'm going to kind of change it up in terms of the nomenclature that I use, because I do not mean to be offensive. So if you see any word that you disagree with, just let me know, holler at me again, I'm going to change it. So here goes the abbreviated of the abbreviation version. Pre-colonial South Africa. Prior to the 16th century, the region of South Africa was dominated by indigenous processes. It is very important to highlight that these indigenous populations who developed social and cultural traditions, as well as political and economic systems, had their processes interrupted by colonialism, capitalism, and eventually apartheid. Right? This is not exclusive to South Africa. However, this is very important because it happened here in South Africa, and I think somewhat of a blueprint was developed for these same things to be applied throughout society. Modern humans have resided at this point at this part of the world for at least 100,000 years, and their lineage can be traced back to more than 3 million years. Again, this is very, very, very important. As we can see, this is a diagram that was pulled from the history of South Africa by Thompson. And this is, again, one map. I know, again, even maps can be contentious because all maps don't actually have appropriate cartography, or I don't think Robben Island is actually on this map. Robben Island is not on a couple of maps of South Africa. That's very important, especially because what Robben Island was used for, is used for, again, in current and previous society. Three of the earliest known groups within South Africa are the San people, the Khoi or Khoi people, and the migrating Bantu-speaking populations who were agro-pastoral and moving toward the southern tip. We can see some of what would become the ethnicities or the homeland populations on this map. Moving forward, colonial South Africa. Now, obviously, we see that the map changes. In the mid-1600s, the history of the southernmost country on the African continent experienced change that would impact the nation for centuries. That would be the arrival of European settlers. The Dutch and British held competing interests in the nation during the early colonial period. They still hold competing interests again in contemporary society. After the establishment of the Union of South Africa, again, I literally glossed over so much history. That is for the sake of this presentation, that is for the sake of time. Again, it's not to omit anything. There are a lot of things that I can mention after this point and before this point. So again, I just want that to be known. After the establishment of the Union, the political development, economic development of the nation began to unfold for various racial groups simultaneously and distinctly. White populations consolidated their power after 2 Anglo-Boer wars, and their economic strategy then focused on maneuvering and exploiting black labor. This, again, I don't need to call black laborers, African laborers, natives. Again, I'm not trying to use words again to be contentious or offensive. This is, again, one from literature, 2 again from lived experience. So again, I tried to combine both to be, again, inclusive within the terminology that I use. Black South Africans who had their interests repeatedly ignored since the arrival of the Dutch in 1652 began to develop political consciousness, forming organizations that would impact the nation throughout the 20th century and beyond. Programs of political organizations highlighted the need for African independence and political and economic development despite the presence of white settlers. So, because this study focuses on class, I'm highlighting here, during the colonial era, there were early class divisions, not only in South Africa, all over the world. This is just the South African treatment by an American. The mining industry developed due to the relationship among the following 4 groups: employers, white laborers and miners, the Afrikaner community, and native, we could say workers, right? I don't mean to say, again, African laborers here. Again, I'm putting an asterisk by that. We don't have an asterisk by it, but I wanted to put an asterisk by that. The first group primarily consisted of wealthy British descendants who were interested in identifying new ways to acquire cheaper labor. The second group, the white labor force, was attracted to South Africa. Some of them were migrants, many of them were migrants who were interested in the country due to their stories of lore about gold and diamonds or other opportunities within the nation. They took advantage of the ability to organize, form unions, working with the British descendants and the Dutch descendants to be able to maneuver their economic status. The third group, Afrikaner Boers, or mainly farmers, sought to retain wealth brought by the discovery of gold within the land that they sought to claim as their estate. The Boers were concerned with preventing native laborers from equal opportunities, wages, and working conditions. The final group, native laborers, what I conceive of as black laborers here, received inhumane treatment on the employment market, were prohibited by law from digging and mining to be able to find those precious minerals, paid substantially less than white South Africans, accommodated in prison-like conditions, prevented from leaving mining quarters during their contract terms, and lacked trade union support. During the pre-apartheid racial class division, during the colonial era, some of the apartheid foundations were laid. During this period, extreme segregation and symbols of the pending apartheid began to formulate. The political paths of the white minority collaborators and the non-white populations were bound to intersect or to be interdependent somehow, some way. As the Union of South Africa began to activate its land appropriation plans and strategies, which drew opposition from all populations within South Africa. In 1913, the Union implemented the Natives Land Act, which formally divided the land, and the Immigration Regulation Act, which outlawed Indians from moving from the province in which they were born. The Urban Areas Act of 1923 restricted natives or Africans' right of movement, and we also had simultaneous political development throughout this process. The African Political Organization was founded in 1902, was open to all races, but was majority composed of colored members of South African society. Later, 10 years later, the African National Congress was developed. And in 1919, the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union was developed. In 1928, the South African Federation of Non-European Trade Unions was formalized, and the African Mine Workers Union, or the AMWU, was founded in 1941. To me, again, these are not the only organizations that, again, changed the history of the country, but I think that some things are contingent upon the actions of these organizations, and they kind of split or splintered from this, the impetus of these organizations. During the apartheid era, the National Party's 1948 victory led to them quickly advancing to further consolidate power, and a post-war nationalism continued to spread during the African independence movement. Then we have the formal institution of apartheid, which is known as separateness or separate development, depending on who you speak to. Four different, you could say, policies or four different effects of the apartheid policy was implemented. As first, there was a division of the racial groups. We now have African, colored, Indian, and white populations, as each had its own culture. Secondly, whites were considered to be the racially civilized group, and were inherently entitled to absolute control over the state. Third, the policy mandated an emphasis on Afrikaner economic and social control. And fourthly, apartheid authorized social separations via social institutions, as each segment of population had their services administered by different institutions throughout the country. Very important person. There was a reason that I put Steve Biko here. Still inspires me to this day, many people to this day. Under apartheid, South Africa industrialized and gradually became different from other countries as decolonization and desegregation spread throughout the global south. As the economy expanded and industries admitted more African workers, racial categories continued to define what would be the gaps in underdevelopment. Again, this is important to me because this is the history of the class development in terms of my study. The apartheid period increased the wealth gap between employed Africans and employed whites. The labor practices preventing black South Africans from attaining employment and while holding spaces simultaneously for others in society was detrimental. The apartheid government had exclusive policies within education, here as we're at the University of Pretoria, that ultimately impacted both the primary schooling and the higher education of the country, as different populations were siphoned into different educational spheres, as well as while curriculums we could say distributed to these populations that would influence and inform what they knew, how they would be able to interact among society. Again, during a trip to WITS 3 years ago when I presented another study that was not a part of my dissertation, I took this picture in front of the Solomon Malongo House. Again, to me, there's so many different people that are important to South African history. Despite any racial status, again, and I really wanted to put them in this presentation, but forgive me for not doing so. This is the era where the crux of modern issues began to formulate as the government emphasized black ethnic differences, provided preferential treatment towards coloreds, Indians over black South Africans, and encouraged internal ethnic fragmentation among Africans. Here's another distinction. Although all of these populations experienced apartheid, of the black Africans, those who were located in the homelands, those who were located in the municipalities or the urban areas, and those who were located in the white farming regions had varied experiences and lived differently. Again, this is a very important distinction. South Africa became an anomaly, as mentioned, as the white minority population was protected by policies during the changing global order that saw the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of the Soviet Union, and growing movements for independence and anti-colonialism. Such activity would catalyze a period of deliberation and negotiations. This is me alluding to Mandela being freed and apartheid formally coming to a close. During this project, you can imagine I've heard many things about the ANC. I've heard many things about Mandela. The world over, everybody learns about, they sing Mandela's praises, but to come here again as an American and to hear that everybody is not necessarily happy with the ANC, everybody's not necessarily happy with how Mandela was able to negotiate his freedom. To me, I think that's very important. And history is full. History is full of anecdotes, and I believe the most important anecdotes are the ones that are accurate. So outside of advocating for any particular group, being accurate in your assessment and your account of history is very important. So I strive to do that. Here goes something that I think is extremely important to note, considering the history of South Africa. There were several class divisions, and there were several developments of political consciousness within the country, and I think that they all operate concurrently and intersect today concurrently in society. The Black South African political assemblies slowly began to organize in South Africa's urban areas as what were once considered tribal groups were gradually restricted from specific areas. The initial African political groups took divergent paths. Which paths am I alluding to? What could be considered, again, in my naivete, my perspective, conservative, liberal, and radical. Considering the British influence on American politics, on South African politics, on the global political economy, the Bretton Woods institutions, whatever have you. To me, when we speak about politics, again, I think as an African person, I think that just saying that the Labour Party is dedicated to workers, the Liberal Party is dedicated to everybody, the Conservative Party is dedicated to the elite, again, I think that's lazy, because at times these people, they oscillate. So Mandela, at one point, he was considered radical. At one point, Mandela was considered very radical. Then somehow he oscillated. Then some people considered Mandela to be liberal. Once Mandela was freed, some people in the ANC who were not within the country, some were in exile, some were participating in training to overthrow the apartheid regime via guerrilla warfare. Some of those people believed that at that point Mandela was conservative. Again, at this point, I think that this is why we can say that these things are a spectrum. These things, again, are not as finite as we believe. Once a radical, always a radical. That's what somebody would say in PSC, right? Maybe. But then now we have different political parties, right? The Progressive Party led to, again, splintering, and now we have the Democratic Alliance. We now have, again, the Patriot Alliance. We now have Action SA. We have different political parties, which I call, people love to talk about the proliferation of nuclear weapons. I talk about the proliferation of political parties in South Africa. Because to me, again, all of this is a response, no, not to white people, I would say Western society, because the same thing happens in America. So me, again, as somebody who could seamlessly meander and move through class, because again, I was born in the underclass, but here I am being a privileged American in South Africa, what is my class status? What do I identify as? I guess I have to be middle class, but what am I in the middle of? That's what one should ask, instead of thinking, oh, I'm better than other people because I'm in the middle. In the middle of what? I'm maybe in the middle because I'm torn at times between both political and racial poles. So they're going to say they don't like you because you come from a country where Trump is doing this, and that. Like, oh, do you identify with me because I'm critical of Trump? Do you identify with me because I'm critical of black people? Do you identify with me because I'm critical of rich people? Again, these are all class notions. Or do you identify with me just because I'm a human? That's what we would say if we were talking to the LGBTQIA community, right? Right. So, why do we let these things stop us? These notions of superiority and inferiority. Why do we let these class symbols stop us? That's what this study is getting to the root of. The middle class construct of urban South Africa. I'm going to move a little quickly here because this is just a bunch of numbers. So before I got to my qualitative research, again, I started to pull data from Stats SA. So this, as I mentioned, the study began in fall 2020, and then it continued until spring 2026. So at different points, the data that I used was from reports that were from 2022, 2023, 2024, and I'm going to update this. But this is what I believe is, I think this 6-year period between 2017 and 2022, which is obviously during the COVID era, that to me again has great implications. So again, some differences, as we can see. When people talk about the middle class, we love to throw, again, being an American, we love to throw averages when we're talking about metrics, when we're talking about data. Everybody says the average this, the average that. But when we look at the median, we can see again the median income or the distribution within this chart. It gives you more of an accurate depiction of, again, what is the middle point. Because some would define the middle class in South Africa as the range between those who earn between 4,000 Rand a month all the way up to 25,000 Rand a month, right? Some would say that that's the middle class. Some people would say, again, if you make this number, then this is again, or around this number, then you're again within the range of the middle class. Depending on which data set that you use, this is all important. But again, this gives us the distribution between the top 25, 10, 5%, and the bottom 5, 10, and 25% of monthly earnings by status and employment between these 6 years. This is the meat of the data, so I'm going to focus here, and then again the other ones I'm going to kind of gloss through. So Stats SA published new data on the median salaries in South Africa. Through this data, it revealed huge differences between earnings across the country, and most workers in South Africa earn far less than the average of 25,000 Rand, which is equivalent to 1,400 USD per month. The median salary in South Africa was recorded at 5,417 during the end of the month in 2022. In December 2022, the average salary at the time in Rand was 24,813 Rand a month. December 22 data. While the average represents the equal distribution among all salaried workers, the median represents, by Stats SA, shows again a midpoint of the approximate 13 million workers in South Africa's economy that earn below 5,400 a month, meaning that most of the earnings are concentrated at the top. Again, as we know when we talk about numbers, there's data, there's good data. Some people may say that this is bad data. Many people can use statistics to argue whatever they want, right? So that again, that should always be highlighted. That's why again, all studies of class are unique. It should not just be, oh, the middle class is this, the middle class is that. We have to use this notion, we have to use that notion. Because this study is focused in the Gauteng province, I looked at the median salary, which is 7,500 per month, the highest in the country among this province, among the 9 provinces. The national median salary is again between this range. It's the national median. So again, some people would say it's between 5,417 and 25,000. Again, it depends. Which, are you looking at the quote-unquote upper levels of the middle class? Are you looking at the mid-levels of the middle class? Or the lower levels, or comprehensively? The average salary in Joburg, again, one of the cities that again is integral economically to the nation and to the world, if we really want to go there. 400,000 Rand annually, right? 33,000 per month, according to 2023 reports, which is often skewed by higher earners. And then this can be further broken up as all this data can be aggregated differently by skill level, where we have skilled, semi-skilled, and lower skilled workers, and the key demographics, just focusing, again, not picking on any population, not because we're trying to say that, oh, there's so much inequality. The white population who had the highest median monthly earnings, 21,000 Rand, while black Africans held the lowest, 4,684. Maybe that's surprising to some, maybe it's not surprising to some. This again is a bunch of other charts, so I'm just gonna kind of just allude to this. I'm not gonna run through this as quickly, but this is the median monthly earnings, disaggregated by sex. Then we have something that's also, I think this is uniquely interesting, the median monthly earnings by population group. So we can see the different racial classifications in South Africa versus the different years and the ages of populations. How much do you earn based on how old you are, based on the time period? All of these are important, and again, I think that these things can be looked at, and this is what I would like to expose students to, particularly within this country, so I could try to work with them. I'll probably learn from them. I'm not saying they have to work with me. I just want to do this in the best fashion where it can be applicable to where we can change things internationally. The median monthly earnings of employees by age and sex. Same thing, this is just organized a little bit differently. We can see whether there was an increase or a decrease. What is interesting to note, or not, maybe not as interesting to note, there still is a wage gap between the sexes or between the genders, where men are earning more than women. It's not because we deserve more. Clearly, we don't have babies, right? So we're just making more. I don't know how, I don't know why, but doesn't mean that we deserve more. And women are still grossly underpaid. Not saying that again, a woman's primary value is having a baby. That's not what I was saying. I was just median monthly earnings of employee by industry. This can also be broken up. This is very important. As we see in modern or contemporary society, where South Africa, we can say, is plagued by administration issues. Some people say corruption, some people say governmental failure, some people say negligence. Utilities earning or being the highest earning industry is very important. In a place where we have power outages, in a place where we have water shortages, in a place where we have electricity shortages, the fact that employees that work in these utilities companies earning so much money, again, that is that could be an analysis in and of itself. Then we have the median monthly earnings by employees and occupation scale, broken up a little bit differently, 2017 compared to 2022. And then we have the distribution of the 6-year period of the median monthly earnings of employees based on occupation scale level. Again, I can send this presentation out or talk to anybody about, again, why I use this data, but I want to get to the Q&A part because I think people may have questions. So as I head towards the conclusion, how race influences class hierarchies in urban South Africa? How do they? This leads me to, my name is Daquan Lawrence, so that's the reason I put Lawrence, who's diaspora theory. Is not to say again that it has to be called that, I don't care. Hopefully I'm just helping. But the diaspora theory of class. My diaspora theory of class. So, well actually let me pause here. The findings. What makes one middle class, or what are the thoughts and conceptions of the middle class? I wanted to prepare a nice chart where I have all of my questions with the responses from the respondents, but I failed to do that while finishing the dissertation and getting ready for my travel here, so I apologize for doing that. But what I can say is highlighting the findings from the research. Most of the respondents said things that fell into these primary areas. There were 3, I might be able to show this. I don't want to waste the time. I really want to show you this data. There were 3 areas, so there were 3 questions. What is the thoughts of the middle class in South Africa? There have been 6 administrations since the fall of apartheid, with the 7th recently being installed a couple of years ago. What are your thoughts on the economic development for Black South Africans in the 7 administrations that have taken place in office since the fall of apartheid? And the last question is, what systems, social practices, or policies prevent social inclusion in South Africa? From those 3 primary questions, the respondents from my research gave a wealth of information. Most of it pertained to a lack of education policies, the amount of debt that middle class South Africans accrue or receive, the fact that people are still, who can be identified as middle class, but are still living pretty much check to check, the fact that there are still remnants, as we could say, from the eras of apartheid and the colonial era that still impacts South African society today. These were all applicable findings, as well as, again, what people could say, which are the normal highlighted responses, which is, again, government failure, corruption within political parties, not just the ANC. I'm going to say political parties, because again, I think other political parties are implicit. It's not just the ANC. Land rights, redistribution rights, again, economic rights, and I think the last one was, xenophobia. Xenophobia from different population groups. Xenophobia against Africans, xenophobia against members of the LGBTQI community, xenophobia again between urban and rural members of South African society, and xenophobia based on class status. So those again were the things that I wanted to highlight. Maybe I could produce the graphics while you, so I can submit that to you all before you leave. But before, like I said, I leave the country, but those were very important. Those findings helped me develop where we will end today. This is a revised treatment of class categorizations that was led by South African researchers, or excuse me, international researchers at the University of Cape Town. So Schultz, Zizemia, and Lembrant in 2017 conducted a study of what the middle class looks like in South Africa, particularly being a developing nation in the global South, or a mid-development country, or a mid-income country, people would say, within the global South. So usually when we talk about class, we say there's poor, there's the middle class, and then some people will say there's the rich, super rich, wealthy elite, right? Understood. This is the way we all grew up conceiving it. What I am challenging within this research is that maybe, just maybe, we could revise this. Again, these researchers here have already attempted to revise what will be the class status by introducing a measure of probability, right? So we could conceive of class differences based on the probability that you will fall into one of these categories. If you are in the quote-unquote poor class, some people will say you are poor, you're working poor, or you're like, some people will say super poor, right? Dirt poor, however you view it. They would consider you insecure. This is the word that I would use. I would say that you are economically insufficient relative to the other categories. And maybe if you're at the quote-unquote bottom, although I have it on the top here, there's a reason for that, I'm gonna tell you. This is where most people who don't have cars, who aren't, again, formally educated, who may, again, not have 2 or 3 incomes in the household, different people based on their ability to enter and engage in the economy. They can be considered as insecure, economically speaking. They also can be considered transient, because maybe, again, as we said, this is a spectrum. It's probably hardest to get here, obviously, but this is a spectrum. People oscillate and go back and forth. If you are a member of what would be considered the middle class, considering the issues that you encounter on a day-to-day basis, the middle class, again, isn't as rigid or it isn't as heavenly as everybody would think that it may be. Because if you are in the middle class, you may just be economically sufficient. But it doesn't mean that if you miss a payment here and there, you won't lose your home. It doesn't mean that you're not scraping up fees to pay for school. It doesn't mean that you're not working 2 or 3 jobs. You could be educated and work at the University of Pretoria, but still have 2 side jobs. You're middle class, right? And you're economically sufficient. You may be vulnerable at times because you might have to save some, and you can't travel, you can't do holiday this year because you don't got it. It's okay to say that you don't have it. You don't have to, as we say in America, keep up with the Joneses. Some people say that you do. It depends. Nowadays we have social media, right? We live in a surveillance state, right? So people are always watching you. You always want to show what you're doing, where you're going, what you're eating, how you look, what you wore, social status. These things are dominating your mind. Or are you stable? If you're more stable, then maybe you're on your way to being economically super efficient. This is what I would call, again, the elite. Some people don't have to worry about money. It doesn't mean that they don't have health issues, because, again, money doesn't buy you time. Or am I incorrect? Maybe money does buy you time. Again, some people, like I said, because they're first class, because they're privileged, because they have so much wealth and status, they forget that they're actually human. So that's why we have transhumanism, and Elon Musk is never mind. But it's okay. That's not a critique. I'm saying this just as a student of life. It's not to say Elon Musk is right or wrong. And he's not the only one. So, as I conclude, class is permeable, as individuals can engage, learn from, and influence people from different class backgrounds. Let's think about, again, like I said, the lazy treatment. Again, I'm not saying this because I hate Marx at all. I'm a Marxist. At one point in my life, I was. The relationship between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat is intertwined. They both need each other. Okay, white and black. The relationship between white and black is intertwined. They both need each other. Urban and rural, intertwined. They both need each other. At no point in society is it, oh, we like to say those are the haves and those are the have-nots. But you can't engage that way because who do the privileged have working for them? Don't they have maids? Don't they have housekeepers? Don't they have people who are mowing their lawns? Don't they have drivers? What part of the economy does the driver fall in? Oh, the driver makes a lot of money because he works for Ramaphosa. Okay, I don't know. Again, you got to think about it. So, class categorizations aren't, or such as low income, middle income, high income, and working poor, and high income are insufficient and misnomers within processes of social stratification. When factoring in variables of identity, researchers can identify an abundance of distinctions between South Africans or people all over the world, bless you, that occupy a single class group. Variables such as ascribed status or perceptions of blackness are incredibly relevant within modern South Africa, where identification determines one's life trajectory. What about middle class South Africans who socialize and work with working class South Africans? The buffer, apologize for not making this copyright. The buffer or the nexus between the colonizers and the colonized. The middle class represents the bridge between the settlers and the colonized. That's it. I don't mean to be spooky. I'm not trying to say let's overthrow the government. I'm just saying let's really talk about reality. Can we? There are many notions, again, that could be considered. Precariousness. Some people are elite and they still live in precarious situations. Again, having all of that money doesn't make you a better human. Class consciousness, high versus low class consciousness. This is where those theories from the diaspora scholars came in. Class and cultural sensitivity. We all talk about cultural sensitivity. If you're somebody who's a part of a white population and you need to be educated about black people, you have to be culturally sensitive. You can't say racist notions. Us as black people or African descendants, we also should be sensitive to class notions. Because we also, again, we perpetuate the status quo. There's another way I could go with this. Some Africans are Europeanized. I don't even want to go there. Some Africans are like really, really, really pro-African. It depends. Again, like I want to discuss it because I come from the underclass, so I can. Then we have accountability versus absolving white people. Something that could be discussed. Some people, oh no, reparations, no, no, no. You're still blaming the system. Well, the system is still systeming. Life is lifing, so the system is still systeming. That's why we're blaming the system. Are you going to have a comprehensive, radical, central, or eclectic and multi-dimensional viewpoint of class? That's what this is striving to create. So again, thank you for your time. This is the presentation I'm now going to conclude. And if you have any questions, please, I hope I can answer them to the best of my ability. And if I can't, I'm going to make sure that I do. See my man in the back. We can have him over here.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation. I have lots of questions. First thing is the sample size. You have about, 85 instruments, 75 were surveys. Did you reach saturation? I mean, how could you get to the categorization of, I guess, classes with such a small sample size? That's my first concern. And second concern really is a lot of the, like the geographic elements, sunny side, like the theme that came out in your results was xenophobia. Oh, I'm right in saying that that might have come more from the sunny side, which is a location that's known to have migrants, which is another concern, or rather query. And then with a lot of the questions that you had, so the NID states was really good. So that's the National Income Distribution Survey, something like that. So it tracks maybe a few 100,000 households in South Africa since 1993 or 1996 to 2019, and it collects demographic data, income data, a whole bunch of stuff. It's also geographically, I guess, it's very geographically specified. It's very, so like that might be a good extension to a lot of the work you're doing. I've heard that the sample size is really small, and you might not really be getting the best picture. Like there might be a lot of bias in the data. That's just my opinion.
So just to respond to the questions before we go on. So one, again, thank you for that. So me being limited. So I didn't put the limitations on the study, but I'm going to respond first. So again, I agree. That's the first thing I would say. So it's not a rebut. This is again a open dialogue. So me being again an American, I have a fellowship from my university, but I didn't have the opportunity to spend 6 months, 2 years in the same population or in the same region. This is what I would prefer to do. When I became a student in 2020, my daughter was 1 year old. So me being again a person who likes to be a father, that's my highest honor outside of being my mother's son. I chose to not spend considerable time in the country and to be a day-to-day father and to come intermittently when I could. So that was my own limitation. Now getting to the studies limitation, like you said. This is exactly why I ended here. So we see the different provinces, some cities located within the provinces. I don't know your name, sir, but again, as mentioned, vastly different population, 63 million people. I focused on 2 large communities. Soweto is big, Sunnyside is some big people, not necessarily big, but again, a large migrant population. So I do admit and I concur with, again, like the biases based on this data. And again, out of less than 100 people, a population of 64, again, this is why I was told to focus and concentrate this would be my thesis, dissertation, whatever have you. I was just told to concentrate, so this is again what I was able to come up with. I'm not saying that this is the best treatment, this is the best way to do it. This is again me being one, admittedly biased towards again an Afrocentric and pro-African lens, and then 2, again being limited based on my time constraints, money constraints, and things like that. So this is basically what I was able to come up with. And then I think the last question or comment I think you had just responding to, again, like I said, the surveys used, like you said, again, thinking about the surveys only assessing about 100,000 people within a certain time period and being more so new. I knew that, but again, I just had to work within pretty much, I guess if I would call that scraps, I don't know if that's scraps, but I had to work with the scraps that I was getting. That's what I came up with. I wish at times, as a researcher, I was like doing cold calls. So there wasn't any way for me to like meet. If I could have sent out this study and said, hey, head administrator at the University of Pretoria, could you tell me all of the students who would like to help me do this? Please let me partner with them. I would have did it that way, but because of me trying to dissert and graduate and get to the point where I could be here on a long-term basis to have my daughter, this is what I came up with. So I don't even know if that's a good response, but I'm just being honest. I have a question about
I think just to respond, when I was in Colomba, and I'm very proud, I was one of the participants who participated in the interview. So very happy that you managed to complete your PhD on time. I thought it was fine because I was a PhD candidate and I'm hoping to graduate sooner than later. And on the actual situation, I know that for qualitative studies, it's possible to read situation with from 12 to 20 people, 4 focus groups. So I'm not sure what to study if it was a hybrid or quantitative or qualitative study. But I know that for qualitative studies, situation points are you are able to reach situation with minimum number of people, and yours is beyond the 12 and 20 suggested sample size we require to reach saturation for qualitative studies. So I'm not sure what your study was, but if it's a qualitative piece of work, then it's possible to reach saturation so there's no sample. There's no need for you to generalize your findings.
And just to respond before moving on to the next question, comment in between both, my dissertation advisor, she said that this could be a lifelong project. So again, I shouldn't think that this is something I'm going to be able to do in this little, not only time that I spend here, but the time that I'm in the country. Like this is something I should probably dedicate my whole life to. And then once I'm more senior, once I have more decades, then I'll be able to say like this is literally valid instead of it being in a small population, a small sample of a large population.
Yeah, I haven't finished. I was
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
yes, I was just saying that it's not an issue if it's a qualitative study. But I actually want to know, just to make sure that I understand some of the interpretations of the findings, would it be accurate to say that the notion of the black middle class as a distinctive class does not exist? And according to you, it's a superficial distinction in our body politic compared to AIDS. Is that a correct interpretation to make in terms of the reading of the study and its implications?
No, I like the way you put it. I could again agree. I'm not going to say again I disagree because I'm not trying to make this a contentious thing where people are like, this is good, this is bad, this is legit, this is not legit. I think that again it's just valid just for us to have the conversation. But what I would like to ask is, are borders real? Borders are as real as the class distinctions and differences. So there are, like, if you want to group people by long hair, short hair, we could group people based on skin color, we could group people based on eye color, we could group people based on money, we could group people based on how big your feet is. We could base people based on how big your physical extremities are, right? So if we're going to do all these things, we could chop up the population based on there's many ways to socially stratify. So for me, again, what I was trying to do, to your point, is try to come up with what would be a baseline between what are the differences or what prevents people from engaging with people from different class backgrounds or ethnic backgrounds or social backgrounds or political backgrounds or hair backgrounds or hearing backgrounds. Is that the distinction? Is it the lanyard you use? Is it the fact that you wear Gucci and Prada? Is it the fact that somebody can't afford it? What makes one middle class? Is it the fact that you have a car? Is it the fact that you have a job? Is it the fact that you have a home? Is it the fact that you go on holidays? Is it the fact that you go to the University of Pretoria? And so many students are struggling just to pay their fees. As an American, I'm struggling to pay my fees. I can't graduate until I pay my bill. So I'm sitting here in South Africa speaking to you, but I'm middle class. So that's the purpose, Stephen. That's so I'm talking to my brother. That's the purpose. So it doesn't matter which segment of the population I use. I just want to get that anecdote. That should go on the record before everybody thinks that, oh, all black Americans are living in heaven. Yeah, we all have privilege. Do we? How much is the privilege? So again, when you ask, is the middle class an illusion? I don't want to say that here because I don't want to make anybody mad. But I never thought the middle class existed. Like I said, the left is the middle to me. So as I went back to this, we have this. There's this thing. There's this class theory. As we get to more questions, we conceive of things as a pyramid, where the most privileged are on the top. But if the most privileged are on the top and they depend on the labor of the people on the bottom, then isn't the bottom the top? If all of the laborers have to work for the privileged people, and we need the labor, we need them uneducated, we need migrant workers, we need conscriptions, we need people who need to be exploited, aren't they the most privileged class because everybody needs them? Oh no, we don't. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Again, this
Just
is
to
just me
finish all
pushing
my
back.
comments, Doctor, I love the fact that your theory of class, in fact, I like this point about oscillating between the different class categorization, and that you can be elite the one day, poor the next day, middle class the next day. These are not fixed, distinctive, permanent class distinctions, and people can and often do oscillate. And the question of debt being central. The only reason why we even have a middle class in this country is not because people are actually are well off financially, but it's because they have more access to debt. And it's the debt criteria. So without debt, is the middle class still middle class? And as far as I'm concerned, the middle class is a poor class category, doesn't get access to credit compared to the rest. So for me, the middle class is a figment of imagination, and it's a political tool to convince the black masses that we are making progress in society, but actually we are not making forward steps in this country when it comes to wealth, redistribution, and things like that.
Some people would say the illusion of inclusion.
Yes.
That's what some people would say.
The illusion of inclusion.
We have, I want to go to the gentleman. I see the gentleman here and my brother here.
Daquan, how is it going?
It's going good, bro. Thank you.
So personally, I felt that your sample size was massive. So that is my first question. I would like to know at what point did you reach saturation? The second question is, what really informed your decision to choose Sunnyside in the city of Tshwane while you chose Soweto in Johannesburg? I'm asking this question because I would have appreciated it if you would have maybe gave one of the townships in the city of Tshwane a chance to be part of your study. At the same time, I would have also appreciated it if you would have chosen a location in the city of Johannesburg as well that is based in the city, like a location like Hillbrook. Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. So, again, the question is repetitive. At what point did I reach saturation? Again, I think probably, like I said, there were 6 site visits. So I think maybe the 3rd site visit, I noticed, again, not necessarily that most of the respondents were saying the same thing, because those were the ones that were highlighted. Again, remember, as I said, I spoke to a larger sample population from, again, different people from different backgrounds, but the people, again, who I was, the location where I was setting up shop, where me and Ali drove to every time that I came here, where I made sure that I was out there trying to introduce myself to people. That was in Sunnyside, that was in Soweto. Those sites were chosen because of half of it was again random, arbitrary snowball method, based again on like who I knew, who could introduce me to people, contacts, because everything was cold. I didn't have an advisor. My advisor studied at the University of Cape Town, but there was no formal red carpet where it was like, you're gonna partner with this researcher at Wits and work with these researchers at Pretoria, and they're gonna do this because they're gonna help you and this, and that. I didn't have that. I literally just put this together. So again, me putting this together, this is again me going to class, me paying attention to YouTube University, me again knowing whoever I knew in South Africa, me coming out here trying to engage with people. I couldn't get on University of Pretoria's campus because again, we didn't have access. So I didn't try to come out here using my privilege to say, oh, can somebody open the door for me so I can have access to all of the population. I wanted to come out here and be regular, be normal, hear people, let them hear my American accent, let them have their presumptions, let them say this guy's foolish, let them say this guy's stupid. I want all of that. I want all the smoke. I wanted all the smoke. And that was the way that I came with it. So again, coming back to the other populations, or the segments of the populations, or regions rather, again, that could be investigated. This is why I've been telling my friends, I have 2 Americans here with me, they can ask you how many times or answer how many times I told them I want to move to South Africa. They say why. Many people in South Africa want to be on the other side of the pond. Right? So again, I want to be here so I won't run into these issues, because again, this is just what got me here. This is the beginning. This is why this is again my dissertation. This isn't the end all be all. This isn't me saying, oh, that the World Bank is going to endorse me. I just happen to be across the street or around the corner from the World Bank. Again, I'm not trying to, I use the privilege to be able to give it to more people. I'm not trying to avoid it. So that's me again trying to deconstruct the middle class from the inside out. That was my conception of it. But my original thesis, what I wanted to focus on was the youth. What I wanted to do was again study the Black consciousness movement. But once I got out here, I was surprised to see that many people are complacent with this black school. Many people are complacent with the fact that they get concessions or they have the benefits, even though the vast majority of the population struggles. Oh, lastly, the population size of South Africa is relative or compared, relatively speaking, is very close to the amount of African Americans in the U.S. And among African Americans in the U.S., about 85% of us are struggling like desperately, but you don't see that. They show you Jay-Z, Beyonce, Oprah, and all those people for a reason. They show you them for a reason. So that's what you think is America, but you don't know that our families, we're doing this, but we have to pay for our families just to exist. Similar to people here. We don't have remittances, we don't call them remittances, but we're sending money to different people too. So again, how much do we have in common or how much is different? That was the purpose of this study. It wasn't to say that this is the only way to do this is the best way to do this. It's not to say that again, as an American, I can study South Africa and here, go buy the book. There is no book. I'm still just trying to pay my bills. Like I'm keeping it 100. So that's how I want you to revere me. That's how I want you to respect me. There's no privilege here. There's no trust fund babies. My mother don't drive a Benz or a Lexus. My father works in a warehouse. He just got out of jail. So that's who I want to talk to. So those are the people who I relate to. Asking again, like, why did I go there? I want to talk to people who I relate to, not to say, oh yeah, oh, woe is us. Because again, if I want the politician's perspective, if I want the economist's perspective, I can easily get that. That's so accessible. But the people, again, that live in Soweto, the people that have to walk to work, the people who don't come into the city, those are the people who I wanted to speak to, again, just because of my relative understanding or my immature understanding. Yes, sir.
So, yeah, thank you for your presentation. I wonder if you maybe looked at some of the writings in South Africa itself in the middle class. I know quite a few years ago there was a study of Soweto, middle class in Soweto, done by the Centre for Sociological Research at UCHA. I think led by Alexander. And they also looked at the electricity crisis and the whole thing linked to that on the middle class. Then Rob Mattis wrote on South Africa's emerging black middle class. He's in Cape Town. And Roger Southwell, more recently, has written on the new black middle class. Have you looked at some of those writings? There's a lot coming out. I mean, what I thought you'd give us a bit more about is some of the narratives, some of the stories of people. There's a lot on black tax, on all those burdens. Did you get a bit of that also?
So yes, I did. Thank you for the question. Just going back to the literature. So one thing I wanted to do, I felt this was me earning my stripes, so I'd be able to contact those people and say, look, I failed to do this. How would you do it? Because I've read, like you said, some of that literature is in my review. Mostly the studies at the University of Cape Town, and Vince. I tried to work with Vince just because of me focusing on Joburg. So I figured it would be good to have, again, university experience for people even here at UP. That was my initial idea. Me and Ali were trying to find a few people at UP. The lady who's introduced me to Professor Marcellus, so it happened, again, via snowball effect. So my plan was to, again, finish this, consult those people to see if that would be a way that, again, I could do this on the ground. And then, again, as far as the findings, that was what I alluded to, where I said that, again, I failed to have that explicit chart with those narratives and those accounts, but that's what's mentioned in the dissertation. It wasn't in this presentation, but I do have it in the actual 200-page document, which I would be glad to send as soon as I submit it. I'm literally supposed to defend by April 24th. And failed to mention this too. The saddest part, maybe this is the best part, maybe it's the most peculiar part. I didn't have to do this. I wanted to do this. I could literally go back to America, present my immature and off findings, and dissert, and come back and say, I'm Dr. Lawrence. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to present my findings to South Africans, to hear critiques and responses from South Africans, so I could inform myself and inform this. So when it is published, it's not just the American guy that's in DC. It's the guy that, again, is trying to formulate sophisticated class analysis based on the perspective of South Africans. And again, I know what I know, but again, as my team has been telling me this entire trip since we've been here, I'm not alone. I've been operating independently as a single father, working alone. Full-time job, full-time teacher, full-time student. I just got the fellowship by the grace of God. No trust funds. No, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to America after you finish university. Congratulations for those of you who have that. I don't. And it's all good if you did, because you still bleed. So, next question.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I was interested in your experience as an African American or Black American coming into South Africa. Well, because myself, I'm from Kenya, and coming into South Africa from a different country, you have like a certain perspective on certain things. So there's a concept of in the United States of acting white, especially when a person of color begins to try to be more successful, trying to move up the class, where they're considered to be acting white. I just wanted to know if you've seen similar concept to that in South Africa.
Yeah, I think they just walked out the door. So, privilege is what we could talk about. I'm an honest person, so acting white is something that I've heard a lot. Growing up, especially being in New York, talking white, that's what we like to say. Everybody has an accent, but they say the more intellectual you are, the more words, the more extensive your vocabulary, we say that's talking white. Now when we talk about language hierarchy, that's something that, again, is inherent in this study. In a nation that has many languages, right, then we have the formalized official ones, right? Your ability to use English permits you to engage in certain parts of the economy that allows you to get a job, that allows you to do certain things, right? So me being able to, I don't speak the Queen's English, right? I speak the broken English, as we say in America. So at times my accent has opened up doors, but it's also gotten me into trouble. At times, again, people, they're gonna assume that, again, I have more status or privilege because, again, just because of me being there, or the fact that I'm wearing a suit, so I might look like the next Joe Smo, because everybody here wears suits, that means that they have money, that they're driving a Land Rover, they're driving this, so again, like, the status comes with what we wear. I actually almost got arrested 2 times before I did my presentation today and yesterday, right? Me doing that, again, that shows, again, my naivete. I'm not saying because of this racial profiling. I'm just saying, again, as an American who's Black, who's trying to do this, there's many vulnerabilities that one could have, but it depends, again, on, I guess, what is your purpose? What is your intent? Because there's many pitfalls, right? But then there's also many opportunities. So for me, I think the way, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Ever since that, or outside of that and including that, I think my experience has been one that wanted to make me be here more. One that has wanted to, even as an outsider, outside of me seeing and witnessing different types of xenophobia, intrinsic cultural classes, intrinsic class competitions. This is, as I say, all universities as their extensions of the state. Universities are like intellectual coliseum. So that's where we're coming and we're trying to debate ideas, and he wanted to go back and forth about privilege and my sample population, and he walked out. But he didn't even meet me as a person. So it's like, again, are you judging me as the book, or are you judging like me as the person? Who am I to you? Am I the shell or am I the soul? I'm the soul. You want me to be the shell. It depends, right? So a lot of people, to your point, I think we see shells when we engage, when we're interacting, is what company do you work for? Where did you go to university? Where do you live? How much money do you have? These are all class notions that we project onto each other, and that's based on, that's like the metaverse. So you have on these, the Oculus glasses, and it's how I'm gonna move throughout society. I can now see, he's worth that much, she's worth this much, this is this culture, this is that culture, so I'm only gonna engage the people who are in proximity to the power that I want to have, right? I don't see everybody else. If you're not, some people say, oh, if you're not heterosexual, you don't exist. Some people say if you don't have money, you don't exist. If you're not white, you don't exist. If you didn't go to the VITS, you don't exist. If you don't go to the private schools in South Africa, you don't exist. Because again, I don't think this is the most affluent college in South Africa. So everybody wants to debate status, but you know, there's higher, right? Aren't there? There's more elite. There's more economically super efficient people, right? So again, at one point, there is a cause for you to even speak to those people. And to go back to your question, sir, the study that was most important to me, or most outside of this one, where I used this chart, the study of the Black diamond population in the emerging middle class, that was one that I wanted to use, but I found it too late. And I figured that, again, this is something that I would be able to, once I relocate, I'll be able to, again, dedicate more time to be able to work with those researchers, to be informed, to have direction. Any more questions? I don't know if you're talking about. You can go to her. You can go, sir.
Sorry, I just wondered if you found amongst your people some of the sort of aspirational projection towards class. You know, and how people use, how they identify class.
Yes.
Sometimes you even find people who you'll assume is middle class, but they take on the working class for other reasons. But I just wondered if you found a bit of that.
Yes. And I'm so happy you mentioned that. We happen to see it. So this is what I would call in transient, meaning again you move back and forth to this vulnerable. I very much understand that this is a sensitive topic. And that's what drew me to it so much, because again, we're exposing ourselves. We're literally taking off, metaphorically speaking, our clothes and saying, this is how much we're worth, this is what we think about society, and this is who we believe and what's important in society. And I think for me, as a radical, not just politically, but as a spiritual radical, and I want to appreciate everybody spiritually, I think shedding these carnal thoughts and limitations, and only treating ourselves, you know, as the material, going back to Marx, that materialist treatment. We're so fixed on the material, but what about the metaphysical? This is what they were talking about. So again, if I'm gonna, when I started my studies, African ontological thought was the first class that I pretty much had to take, learning again how to think of the world from a non-Western lens. So that's where I started from, and then trying to move through there. Again, I gradually developed myself. But again, this is very junior, and this is again just something that just got me here, right? So I'm hoping that again I'm gonna take all of the feedback that I get to hopefully be able to. This I hope inspires other, as I wrote in my dissertation, other members of the marginalized classes, just to show them that again, one, we all can work together, but two, if I can do this, as somebody who comes from foster care, somebody who comes from teenage parents, as somebody who's a full-time dad, as somebody who's again is due to graduate whenever I pay my bill. If I can do this, then imagine what somebody can do who's really dedicated to it, who's been here, who's on the ground up, who again has more status or more access to me, what they can do, right? And again, not just one person, we all can do this. So that's, I'm hoping that that's what happens in the days following, or years following. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I think you kind of alluded to it, but I'd like to know if you're open to collaboration going forward.
Definitely.
Because I think in post-apartheid South Africa, we still haven't talked about this issue enough. And I feel like the society as a whole, we sort of, the word I want to use is pussyfoot around the topic, you know? And so, but the generations also, post-apartheid, we haven't closed that gap. And that gap is just widening, especially when it comes to education, right? And I feel like that is what the system is using to keep the gap like that, and also to enlarge it to some extent. What I'm most interested in is how do we get people from the poor to the Lawrence justice structure, to economically sufficient? Because that is also, I feel like it's on a slippery slope where a small number of middle class people are moving forward, but they're not turning back, you know, to help whoever they left behind or where they come from, to help them to move at that same pace or even surpass that pace. Because we also have that. The topics that can come out is how we leaving other people behind that are still struggling, you know. So yeah, do you have any suggestions or findings from your study that could be tools, you know, especially for the youth, because
Yes.
they have to take the baton further.
Yes, no, absolutely. One, thank you. So as far as collaboration, any and everyone, as much as possible, as much as time permits, or as again people's interest, work schedules permit, this is something again that I would like to continue to do. In terms of, we could say, strategies or tools from the findings and from the study, I would say this is why I focused on the Milcom-Cabral's notion of class suicide. So in some, whether we conceive of it or whether we don't, there is some version of classism that exists. Classism is not new, right? So before capitalism, we had the feudalistic society. Feudal societies had classes, arrangement. Social stratification is not new, right? We used to organize ourselves based on trade. We still do, these industries, right? So the work that we do and our social and political status, that does have something to do with it in terms of, again, that what makes one. Before I even did this in South Africa, I was focused on America, to get to your first comment about the generational perspective. I consider, because of my familiarity with South Africa, I believe we have an American caste system. We would think about the Indian caste system, or the caste system of India. I think we also have a caste system in America. I think we have American apartheid. I wrote a poem and published that online. So I try to use these notions to get people to see that, again, apartheid obviously originated here, it's applied here. This is, again, the number one that has no parallel. However, again, there are many different aspects and segments of society when we look at social stratification, where some similar things are happening in Europe, where there's certain European populations, Roma people being ostracized for different reasons, right? Some different migrants. If we look at, again, across the African continent, it's happening. We look at Latin America. This can be all applied across the global South as well as in Western societies. Going back to, before I get to the tools, I wanted to say this before I forget. Generationally speaking, I'm dating myself for a reason. I hope this helps, like you said. I was born in 1990. That is the period when apartheid was, you could say, on its decline before the transition between 94 and 96. 1994, I was 4. 1996, I was 6. So here I am as a 36-year-old man talking about the last 30 years, and as you just said, within the country, everybody hasn't had this type of discourse. Everybody hasn't been able to come to terms, come to agreement. People haven't, again, from different backgrounds, there's no universal thought about what is the current society and how its implications work. And this is why I wanted to build a study from the ground up to get the perspectives of people who, quote unquote, live at the bottom, the people who are migrants, the people who, oh, nobody go to Sunnyside because those are all the people from Zimbabwe. Well, that's interesting to me because when I go see people who are South African married to Zimbabweans or married to people from the Congo or married to people from different places, and they all live in Sunnyside, again, that should be an example of the multiracial, multicultural society that we're talking about in the Rainbow Nation. But if that's supposed to be the scum of the earth, why is that? Why is Sunnyside the scum of the earth? Because it doesn't look as good as Santon? Because as an American, I'm supposed to just come here and go to Santon, right? I'm not supposed to go to Hebron. So that's, again, there's differences in conceiving where you want to go and where you fit in at. And that's again why, like I said, this is just for me to get into the door. And going back to tools, I think outside of the class suicide, I think, to me, it's not written in the dissertation, but this is more of a personal philosophy. I believe, again, other things I could talk about. I have a poem called Colorism Blues, where I believe that we separate each other based on our gradients of melanin that we have. These people are melanated, these people aren't melanated. We call them white, these people are non-white. I think that, bless you, I think that people as a humanity, we have way more in common than anything that separates us. So a personal philosophy is to, in every obstacle, I see equal opportunity, and I believe that everybody, we all need each other. There's so many poems that, again, I could refer to. I'm not trying to just, again, like cite myself, but the way I look at it is we're all interconnected. So if you can conceive of it that way, it's not, or if you could believe that, again, just because one has more opportunities or access than you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're better than you. So again, like there's interchanges amongst class. Or if you want, again, to me studying, history, I've tried the radical approach. I've tried the Rage Against the Machine approach. But even within that, you have, among the left, there's no consensus, right? So it's, at some point, again, you have to work with people from different strata to be able to engage, to be able to accomplish anything. One is too small of a number to accomplish anything. So I would say those, again, are the tools, but it pretty much starts, some people say you have to work within the system. You have to acquiesce, you have to, again, learn what are the parameters and the landscapes, and then you can use those institutions to, fulfill your agenda. Because again, we live in my assessment, a corporatist society. There's, speaking of Britain, because this is, again, me being an American, we are also influenced by the British. Jeremy Bentham wrote something about, in the 1800s, about the panopticon theory. So if you think about, and this is where again I'll conclude, we all are being watched. We're all being surveilled, right, by the same watcher. What is that watcher? There's whatever have you, the Illuminati, whatever it is, right? But we're all getting like our phones, our televisions, our monitors, our computers, laptops, iPads. They're all windows into our society. So we have to be able to engage and exist in a society where instead of competition, which is one of the primary products of capitalism, we need to think collaboration, right? So why do I have to compete with everybody because of scarcity, because we're running out? Why can't I collaborate with people? If we think that way, then again, we'll see more opportunities, but I can't project that onto people because some people have deep-seated, like, hatred and rivalries, amongst each other. And again, I'm just talking about among the black population. I'm not even talking black or white, or black and Indian, or black and colored, right? I could just focus, there's so many ways you can do this study, again, just within the colored population. When I first started, I wanted to do Kaialisha. I went to Kaialisha. I was told not to do Kaialisha because why would you do Sunnyside and Pretoria and Soweto and Kaialisha, because they're all different, right? So again, my idea was to get here, then hopefully I could break this up into small pockets. Do Johannesburg specifically, do Pretoria specifically, do the Western Cape specifically. Then again, look at different segments of the population. It wasn't to make this, again, an overgeneralized theme. And again, I'm the American, I'm correct because I came from South Africa. That's not what this was.
Just on that note, what you mentioned about the caste system, there's a good movie, American movie called Origin that explains it very nicely. Well done.
Thank you for mentioning that. Make sure I see it. And if I could get anybody's contact information again for sharing information purposes or again as far as collaboration, you have to go, please. Or even critique to inform me and make this better. Again, please. Yes.
So I get the impression that it's not over yet. I get the impression that you still have the urge to go further and do more studies in South Africa. So I would like to know that are you still eager on going to Kaialisha?
Yes.
Number two, I've seen Professor Kyoguchi, right? I believe it's your advisor. I've seen him come with students from Howard University to KZN, and apparently those are his IsiZulu students, right? So I would also like to know if, having been in South Africa for a while and having done extensive research in South Africa, have you thought about possibly building more partnerships between Howard University and South African universities?
Yes, sir. Thank you. For the sake of time, I'm going to speak quickly. Thank you for mentioning that. The project that I mentioned that I presented at ITS was about that. It was about academic diplomacy, the potential for partnerships between African universities and HBCUs. I go to a HBCU, which stands for Historically Black College and University. So again, similar to South Africa, our education system is a little different. We educated people of African descent. Primarily, every person that was black didn't have to go to a HBCU. We now have policies and the law allows people to go to any institution they want to if they get accepted. But there was a certain time within our history where only black schools took black students. And in my research, there was a lot of work done on the African continent. So I wanted to explore that. That's another thing. You could put those classes in a way. I just wanted to investigate partnerships. How can I get people working together? How can I, even if it doesn't have to be my university, Howard, if it could be a George Mason, if it could be a Georgetown, if it could be a Northwestern University, if it could be a University of California. It would just have to be the researchers and the students that would be interested in the topic. So again, I'm just hoping that I can make it, for lack of better words, make this sexy enough so people are saying, hey, maybe I can do this because he did it wrong. So let me make it sexy, and then other people can try to do it better. And then yes, again, I'm super interested in continuing this. I would love to go back to college. And again, like I said, all of the locations here. Notice again, this is only one province, and there's so many other. If we want to talk limitations of the study, for the sake of time, I'm not going to say it here, but I'm glad to share all of the limitations so we can see how much potential we have to make any version of this better.